Okay, so let me just introduce you. We don't have a lot of time left. Uh, so concurrency basically uh, this is the way the Ramji's book has organized this part of the topic. In different books, it is this topic is organized with different names. Somewhere they call it synchronization, somewhere they call it so different names they call it. Um, uh, but we will stick to the book that we are following. So, so this topic is going to be very interesting topic. It will not be multiple reason for that. There will not be a lot of stuff to remember here. Unlike CPU and memory virtualization, we have a lot of mechanism details which you have to remember. What is happening where, how things are going on that way. So as far as concurrency is concerned, there is not much mechanism stuff, as at least for the major part of the core thing. Will be not all the mechanism stuff is very less. So you don't have to remember many things. The things to remember is few only. Uh, and it is also intellectually very puzzling. So it can be hard, it can be the hardest part of the course, because we'll be dealing with multi-threaded programs or parallel programs or concurrent programs, what we'll call them. So normally we are more familiar with sequential programs where after one instruction, second instruction works in a particular sequential order, and it is very easy to figure out what will happen when, and if there is an error, we can easily spot out. But we'll see in concurrent programs, we'll be giving you just 3 or 4 lines of code, and we'll be asking you whether the code is correct or not. And you may have to spend a lot of time staring at that code and trying to figure out whether the program will run correctly, or there is a possibility of wrong output. So sometimes it can be hard to figure out that. So it can be the hardest part of the code if if you don't like those puzzles kind of things, solving puzzles and all those things. But those who like this, they will enjoy it. It can be a very fun. So it can be a lot of fun in these things. So as I said, there is less things to remember, more things to think and imagine. Also, you have to imagine many things. We'll see that. So that's why in some books this topic is covered immediately after CPU virtualization. So they will discuss about CPU scheduling and CPU things, and immediately after CPU scheduling, they will talk about this synchronization and concurrency. But because many times people find it hard to understand and do that things, in Ramji's book they have instead of putting it in the beginning itself, they have put it somewhere in the middle part of the course. So by now you would have already got familiarized with the course, and hopefully taking up this topic at this point of time will not be a difficult. So you have already basic concepts are there. You know about how things are working in the background. So understanding this will be much easier in that sense. The word concurrency basically is there are different connotation associated with that, but basically it means doing multiple things at the same time. Um, at a time, either by either overlapping or interleaving or sharing of resources. So we have it's not something that we are going to see for the first time in this course. We already are seeing, when we are running multiple programs at the same time, actually only even though you have one CPU, you are able to run multiple programs. on your system. And that is called multi-programming support. So we have seen that support, how OS makes that support happen. So even there is one CPU, basically you are running one process, let us say P1 for some part of time, and then there is a context switch, and then another process P2 runs. But this context switching happens, or this switching happens so frequently that the user or it appears for the user that multiple programs are running at the same time. So this is also called concurrent execution of programs or processes or programs. In contrast, there is something called parallel execution. Parallel execution happens when there are multiple CPUs. When there are multiple CPUs or multiple cores, then let us say you have two CPUs or two cores. So one CPU may be executing one process P1, another CPU may be executing process 2. If that is happening, then there is no interleaving happening. Two processes are simultaneously running, but they are running on different processor or on different cores. So this is called parallel execution actually. So there is a slight difference between concurrent execution and parallel execution in terms of terminology. So normally when people say parallel execution, it means that there are multiple CPUs or multiple cores where different processes are running on each core separately. And when we say concurrent execution, generally the implied meaning which is taken is that there is interleaving happening. So although at a time only one process is running, but it appears that multiple things are happening at the same time. So, but many times these word concurrent and parallel will be used interchangeably. So this, I have made this difference clear to you, but you will find in many books or many places sometimes, because the scenario in which this happens is so common that sometimes the word concurrency, parallelism and all these things, sometimes they get used interchangeably. So don't get confused with that. That may happen in some things. So why concurrency is involved? Why this? What is that? Why we should do concurrent execution or parallel execution? First of all, OS itself, this thing happens in the OS itself, because OS itself has to handle many things at the same time. So while this OS is managing our entire system, we have seen that OS is juggling a lot of things around. It is doing a context switch, it is handling interrupts, it is doing some background tasks like writing to a disk or IO operation and all those things. So it is managing many things at the same time, because there are multiple processes running and memory allocation is happening. So OS is actually, the way OS code is written is it's a multi-threaded program that it is a multi-threaded code which is written. We'll talk about thread later on. OS program is, so it will be concurrently handling many things at the same time. So this problem of concurrency or the scenario of concurrency arose as early as the OS, in the development of OS itself. So by necessity, a program may have to do that thing. Another reason why you may want to do concurrent or parallel execution, to speed up for faster execution. Or speed up your task. So if you have multiple cores, if you have multiple CPUs, so if you have 4 CPUs, let us say, or 4 cores, nowadays we have cores. So just a side point here, previous to this last decade, instead of cores, generally speed of execution of your processor was being increased by all the companies, your Intel, AMD and all these processors. They were trying to basically make each processor more powerful and more faster. But at some point, so there was Moore's law, which stated that in every 10 years, the clock speed of the process speed would increase by 2 or 3 times. But after in around 2000 or 2005, people struck a wall because there were some physical constraints which because of which now making up individual processor more powerful became impossible, because the amount of heat that was getting dissipated, and there was so there are three walls which is called power wall, memory wall, and I think the heat wall. So if you try to increase the processor more faster, you don't get any more leverage out of it, because either the heat dissipation becomes so much that your chip runs the risk of melting down, or even if you increase the processor more faster, because your memory and other things have not increased to that, the speed has not increased that fast, your overall system performance does not increase, and other reasons are there. So because of that, the industry shifted to, instead of making each processor more powerful, the company started introducing multiple cores on the same chip. So instead of having one single powerful large processor, have multiple small cores which are less powerful, but because now you have multiple cores, effectively you can use them parallelly to execute your job faster. So that's why multi-core era has come. So that has necessitated now, because every processor, every system comes with at least 2 or 4 cores. Now writing a sequential program is not so beneficial, because you will be only utilizing only one CPU or one core. So now, in order to fully utilize your system, it is almost a necessity to write a multi-threaded program, or a program which can do multiple jobs, multiple things at the same time, so that you can fully utilize all the cores or all the CPUs available in your systems. So another reason why concurrency is important, is because now we want to do faster execution and speed up when there are multiple cores available in each systems. So let us say if you are trying to add an array or a large array, or multiply a large matrices. So instead of doing the entire thing on one core, you can divide your array into 4 chunks, and let this part of the array get processed by one process, this part get processed by another, and this part of the data get processed. So you run a multiple process to process the different. So you divide your entire task into small subtasks, or your big data into small sub chunks of data, and assign each chunk of the data or each subtask to different processes, and let them run simultaneously, if possible, if that can be done. So for example, normally array can be, if you are doing, let us say, a sum of 2 arrays. So each operation on this part of the data is independent of operation on this part of data. So this can be easily parallelized. So you can divide those into, you can take this chunk of the data of this chunk of the array and give it to one process, and similarly other process, and let all these processes run on different cores. So in that way you can speed up your execution or speed up your process. Any other reason why you may want to do concurrence, why you may want to do a concurrent execution or parallel execution? Any other scenario where it will be helpful? So consider scenario like a web server. So wherever you have to do interleaving or overlapping, I think better word is overlapping. So many times you would like to do overlapping of different tasks like CPU with IO. So that you can utilize your resources effectively. So that is another reason why we do concurrent execution. So we have already seen in terms of why we do multi-programming, because if one process goes for an IO, we can CPU is idle, we can start another process to start running. Similarly, in a more let us say if you take a web server. In web server, what is happening? Normally, web servers are written as a multi-thread programs. So why it is done? Because in web server, what it is doing, it is basically reading a request from a browser or from a client, and basically it is either extracting the basically parsing that request to understand what needs to be done, which data will be done, and then it may be reading from the disk, and then it will be returning the data to the client. And this, it keeps on doing in a loop. The next request comes, it again does the same thing. So so now this part and this part is fast, but this reading from disk is an IO operation. So 1 and 2 and 4 can happen very quickly, but 3 is an IO operation. So, and normally when on a web server will receive multiple client requests simultaneously. So especially if it is a Google web server or something, millions of requests will be logged into simultaneously. So while it is doing a search operation or reading from disk and all those operations, it has to overlap multiple client requests. Otherwise, it will be very suboptimal thing. So what it will do, basically, the first request come, it will do 1 and 2 very quickly, and then the third task, which is an IO operation, that is going to take time. So in between, it will start serving the another request comes, so a context switch will happen, and for the second request, again 1 and 2 will start, and when the third an IO operation happens, it will again do a context switch and start serving, open the third request and start doing other things. So in that way, it can serve multiple clients request simultaneously. So that's another reason why we should do concurrent execution. So here we can say all these client requests are being concurrently served by the web server. And the reason why we want to do it, because we want to overlap our CPU with IO and all those things for better. And there are many other reasons. We are up with time. So in your for your graphical user interface also, normally programs which have GUIs and they may also have computations undergoing. So when we are interacting with GUI, there are a lot of IO operations happening, or a lot of things are happening in the background. So in this one node itself, something may be there are so many things which have to be done simultaneously. There may be some computational happening. If I convert it into it to text, if I do a text recognition, probably a lot of computation will be going underneath. But at the same time, I may continue using the graphical user interface, doing click here and there. So each request, if should be handled by separate process or separate thread. Otherwise, once an IO or a large computation thing starts happening, other things will get stuck. Your interface will get stuck. It will not respond. So to make it responsive, generally these graphical user interfaces are handled by a multi-threaded program, so that each thread serves a different part of the functionality. So if one thing goes into an IO, the other thing still can progress. So your process still seems to be responsive. It does not seems to be hanged or stuck. And earlier, like somebody also said, it also helps in scheduling thing, because like earlier when we were discussing scheduling policy, and somebody asked that what happens for gaming. In a game program, normally there is a computation also involved because of rendering, doing the graphics computation, and then there is an IO also involved. A lot of interaction is also needed. So normally a scheduling policy works well either for a CPU or for an IO. But may not work well for both kind of things. So in that kind of scenario also, if you write that kind of a program as a multi-threaded program, where one thread takes care of the rendering thing and another thread takes care of the IO part, then each thread can be scheduled independently. So in that way, it helps in scheduling also. So by separating out different tasks of different nature into different threads or different processes, basically it helps in scheduling, event responsiveness. So if some part gets stuck, if an IO if background calculation is happening or something is happening, still your interface, your graphics interface can actually still be responsive. So I just took an example of games. It can be for any, like this software that I'm using. It can be for this software also. Writing almost all the softwares are written in a multi-threaded way. Each thread doing different part. One thread taking care of the IO, another thread taking care of the rendering thing, another thread taking care of the background aspect, and so on. So this was the reason. This was why concurrency is important in the current scenario. But when we do concurrent execution, we'll see it causes some problem. It may cause some issues that we need to deal with. And that is what we are going to start understanding. But before that, let us see if we have to implement concurrency. There are two options. There are two options. Option one, which is we just use processes itself. So instead of we have not introduced the thread abstraction. So we are familiar with the process abstraction. So we can, instead of using a new abstraction called thread, people earlier in the earlier days before threading, the concept of thread was introduced, people could use the normal classic process itself for concurrent execution. So in that case, basically, if you have to implement a concurrent program using process itself, then you have to basically use a cooperating or communicating thread. Communicating processes. So if you use multiple process, so for example, what I said, if you want to, let us say, work on different parts of our array separately, where we are giving one process one part of the array, another process another part of the array, and so on. So we will need some kind of a cooperating or process which can communicate among each other in order to do this. For example, this process should be sharing this array. So this array will be a shared data amongst. This array will be a shared data amongst all these processes. Okay, so so in this case, basically we will be creating each process separately, but we know normally each process does not share data. So normally they have their separate address space. Each process in the classic process that we have talked about earlier. In our classic process, we have its address space where we have code and probably heap section and then stack section. Now this virtual address space for the process is by default isolated from other processes address space. They do not share unless they explicitly do some kind of a sharing mechanism. Okay, so normally code do get shared, but generally heap and stack generally they don't get shared. So there needs to be some mechanisms called inter-process communication mechanism. These are isolated from other processes. So so in order to help, in order to implement cooperating processes, we need some kind of inter-process communication mechanisms. So so that processes can share data among themselves, they can communicate some data or some messages among themselves. Then only we can implement cooperating or communicating processes. Because what we are trying to do, we are trying to subdivide our tasks among multiple processes. So they need to communicate in some manner, and there are different mechanisms which are available for inter-process communication. One of them, most common, is called shared memory. Another common mechanism is called message passing. first we'll talk about these two, not in much detail because our main focus will be on multi-threading, because now more than ever, mostly whenever we have to do this kind of concurrent execution, we generally go for a multi-threaded program rather than using a multiple processes. We'll tell why threading actually has more advantage than creating multiple processes. But earlier these techniques were used. So in shared memory, the idea was basically we have two processes. Let us say in your RAM, OS is taking some space, process A is taking, let us say, this space, and process B is taking this space. The allocation of the address space for A is this and B is this, and then they will use some system calls like SHM get. So there are system calls like shared memory, get shared memory. So using this, they can basically be allocated a common area, common memory, which will be shared by both the process A and B. So this will be the shared memory between the two processes, and there is a system call by which you can do that. This system call has some arguments by which the OS assigns a common area as a shared memory. So a common data, other things which have to be shared among these processes, they can be created in this shared memory area, so that both processes can have access to them. So in this way, in this kind of mechanism, OS just creates this shared memory between the two processes for once, and then does not get in between them. Then A and B, after that, they just communicate through this shared memory area. Of course, we need to synchronize their access, because when they're accessing the same data simultaneously, then we need to have some mechanism to synchronize the access to the shared data. We'll talk about that later on shortly. If you don't synchronize, what kind of problem will happen. But the other scenario where OS is more actively involved is called message passing. In message passing, basically what happens is we have two processes, A and B, let us say. And OS actually maintains some kind of a message queue or some kind of a buffer, so which can store some messages which can be sent by these processes. So process A may send a message and giving a name to which process it is trying to send this message, and OS buffers those messages, and then those messages can be read by the other process. So OS gets involved. OS maintains the messaging mechanism, some kind of a message queue, and there are system calls by which you can do send and receive. So there are message calls, send, receive, something like that. I'm purposely not going into details of these system calls because we will not be discussing them in detail. These are generally older methods, now not so frequently used. But in this method, synchronization was more easier because there is no shared data. A and B are whatever data they have to share, they will send through this. They will send it through these system calls, and OS will be buffering those messages, and through that processes will be reading them. So, but this will be more, as you can see, this will be more slower because it has to, every interaction between the two processes will involve an OS in between. So it will get little slower than things, but synchronization issues are less in this kind of a scenario. So one method of message passing is called piping, which we have not discussed in detail earlier. Generally in shell program actually uses pipes for communicating between its child processes. So one of the common method is called piping. So in basically OS creates some kind of a pipe between the two processes. So when you use a system call pipe, basically it returns file descriptors. So generally it returns two file descriptors, file descriptor 0 and file descriptor 1. So one of them, these two file descriptor points to the different ends of the pipe. And using these file descriptors, you can either write and read from the pipe. So again, if two processes have to communicate, if they have this pipe in using this pipe, it basically acts like a message passing mechanism. So pipes acts as a buffer. So whatever is written on from one end can be read from the other end. So normally what happens in the parent process, you will create a pipe. The parent process will create a pipe, and then after that it will fork. So in the child process, basically, child process will also receive both the file descriptor, because they will get copied into the child process abstractions address memory space also. So both parent and child will have the pointers or the file descriptors for the read and the write end. So now parent can write from one end and child can read from the other end. So in that way, they will be able to communicate through this pipe mechanism. So this is one mechanism which is used very commonly in shell program and other things for communicating between cooperative processes. So that is one thing. And then there are other methods also, sockets, signals, and all those. Those are also some methods by which process can send signals to each other and so on. But as I said, we will not talk more details about this inter-process communication. Some of the older books do talk in more detail, but in Remji's book, he has not talked about this inter-process communication at all. Probably because now the more preferred method is multi-threading. So going by, because we are following Remji's book, so I am also not going to go into more details. Just for the completion sake, I have discussed this terminology so that you are aware about it. So if you are using browsers, if you are using processors for cooperating process, what are the advantage of this? Pros of using option 1 means using multiple processes for doing a concurrent task. Just for the sake, do you nowadays modern browser, if you use Chrome or if you use Edge, then you see it actually consumes a lot of memory. Do you know the reason for that? Modern, if you use Chrome browser or if you Edge browser, and if you even open 2 or 3 websites or tasks, it actually, if you see go to the task manager, and if you see, probably I may be running. I'll just show the. So you can see this Microsoft Edge browser is open and Chrome browser is also open. Surprisingly, it is not using a lot of memory today, because probably I'm not sure, but generally it tends to gobble a lot of memory. You can see there are multiple. If you open it, there are multiple processes. Each of these is actually a process. So this browser is actually implemented using multiple processes, and each of the process will be doing some task. One of them may be a renderer process, one of them may be a receiver process, and some of these process will correspond to the different tabs that we create. Each tab is actually generally, when we create a new tab, open a new tab basically on the things, it is actually a new process rather than a thread. One of the reason for this is, and that actually makes it a bulky process, takes a lot of memory and all that. Why do you think modern browsers should do this? instead of going for a multi-threaded implementation, they go for this option one. They use each task is done by a separate process. So what can be the reason? The main advantage of this is isolation, security, because nowadays the security issues are much more important for browsers. So that's why they generally tend to have each task done by separate process, because each process address space is isolated. So in case if some malware or some things get, or from some website actually has a malware or something, at least it does not take over the entire browser or other important parts of the systems, because as we know, each process is address space is isolated. They normally do not communicate directly until there is a mechanism established by the OS. In that case, OS also may keep track of it. So because of the security issues becoming more important, the modern browsers tend to have this thing. They go for a multi-process implementation. As compared to some of the older browsers, only you can still find they are using multi-threaded. They don't consume so much memory. But the modern browser actually use this approach primarily for isolation purpose, for security purpose. And also, if one website gets hanged or gets crashed, your entire browser will not get crashed. Only that process will get killed, but the remaining browser, remaining process, the remaining websites will keep on still working. And also, it's more convenient. We don't need any new abstraction to learn. So people who are more familiar with, so no need for any new. So that is the only reason why people will prefer for things. But the disadvantages are many for these options. What kind of disadvantage are there here? Each tab is sandbox, one process for each. Yeah, okay. All code and resources for rendering website is duplicated for as many tabs. Yeah, good. Ayush, I think knew the answer, but I did not see the answer earlier. So speed wise is not so much a reason for that. But what are the disadvantage of using a separate process for each task? We have seen we have to explicitly use some inter-process communication mechanism, which will make programming also difficult, because then you have to use all those system calls and all those things to share data or to communicate among themselves. Program cannot control scheduling. Yeah, but that is anyhow controlling. Scheduling is not controlled by any of the program, not even threads. Normally it is the OS which decides what should run. So, but as we have seen, one of the disadvantage I've just seen, it is consumes more resources. So more memory, resources like memory, because each process will have its own address space. So in that sense, it is more expensive. This option is more expensive in that sense. And again, there are overheads. There are communication overheads are there involved. If you are going for message passing mechanism, there will be communication overhead. And so on. Context switch, later on we'll see context switch also is more expensive here. We'll explain this reason relatively when we talk about thread, why context switching is more expensive for process. But let us just introduce the other option. I don't know whether we'll be able to complete it. Option 2 is use threads. It is a new abstraction that we'll study. Which is basically nothing but, we can sometimes, it is called lightweight process. It is a lightweight process. So a lightweight copy of a process. Let me write it. Of a process that executes independently. So what do you mean by lightweight copy of a process that executes independently? There are two things I need to explain this. So we have seen our classic process. In our classic process, we have a virtual address space, and then we have its register context, which are also private to the process. So registers can be its program counter, stack pointer, and then other general purpose registers which are used for computation purpose and so on, isn't it? So now in thread, what happens is basically so normally a process, as we said, because it has only one program counter, it has only one activity going on. So whatever program counter has, whatever instruction program counter is storing, only that instruction will execute, and then program counter gets incremented to the next instruction, and then next instruction executes. So in a sequential manner, instructions get executed in a sequential manner. So that is what we are familiar till now, sequential processing of instructions. In multi-threaded scenario, what happens? In multi-threaded process that we are going to talk about, there are many threads, and threads, as I said, is kind of a lightweight copy of a process that it is doing its own activity. So that means there are many activities which are going on within a process at the same time. So how your view will change? So if you see the same abstraction, so the virtual address space still will be common. There will be one virtual address space, a private memory to a process. So code may be shared. There will be only one copy of the code. Heap and other global variables, they will be also shared. But there's something different will happen for stacks. We'll talk about that later on. Well, let us say there are two threads. This process has two threads which are created separately. So there will be at least two sets of registers for each thread. So there will be two register context. So let us say this is thread 1, and let us say this is thread 2. So each thread will have its own program counter, its own stack pointer, and its own general purpose registers. each thread will have its own stack pointer, program counter, and general purpose register. So the idea is that each thread will act as a kind of a separate process itself. So each will can execute separately. So because each will have its own program counter, each program counter can store any instruction. So this can store different sequences of instruction. This program counter can have its own instruction. So both threads can be executing two different instructions within the same context of one process. And similarly, they will have their own stack pointer. So the stacks of each thread will also be different. So one process stack may be here, another thread stack may be somewhere here. So stack one will be, so this stack pointer will be pointing to the stack address of this, and this stack pointer of thread 2 will be pointing to this. Because we'll see each thread will be calling its own function. So because they will be calling their own routine and they will be executing their own independently of other threads. So then they will need their own stack, because stack will need to store all that stack frames for each function call and so on. So each thread will require its own stack, and each thread will have its own program counter and its own general purpose register. They will do the computation independently of each other. Okay. So that is how it will done. But at one point in your hardware, you have only one program counter. You have only probably one stack pointer. You have only one set of your general purpose registers. So what will happen? If there is only one CPU and one set of things, then you will have only one set of program counter, one set of probably stack pointer, and so on. So you will be interleaving it. So one thread will execute for some point of time, and then there will be a context switch, and then another thread will run for some point of time, and then there will be context switch, and then probably thread 1 will again allocate. So just like whenever processes were being switched, there will be when context switch happens, so processes versus threads. So there is some common thing and some different when there is a context switch between process and when there is context switch among threads. When there is a context switch between process and threads, one thing which is common, both will save and restore the register context of the currently running process to and from the program control block. In this case, there also saving and restoring will happen. The register context of each of the thread to and from. Instead of program control block, there is a thread control block. We call it thread control block. So each process will have multiple thread control blocks, because each thread has its own set of, as we have seen, each thread has its own set of it has its own register context. So each thread will have its own thread control block, which will store the relevant information required for each thread. So when switching between thread is happening, then the register content of each thread will be saved and restored from the thread control block of that particular thread. So that saving and restoring is common for both. But in process, what happens? Another additional thing has happened. The address space also changes. When a new process starts running, it has its own address space. So it changes the page table base register pointer. So whenever a context switch is happening, the page table base register content will also get updated, because a new process will have its own its different address space. So the page table has to switch. So the page table base register will change whenever there is a context switch between process. But whenever there is a context switch between threads, there is no need for change, because the address space remains same. because threads, each thread has the same address space. They are using the same address space. So is this thing clear? Any discussion on this before we are already up with time?
So if we are trying to implement concurrency using process and there are multiple CPUs involved, so will we use all the CPUs or will everything happen on one CPU?
No, if there are multiple CPUs, all of the CPUs will get utilized. So normally the scheduler will take care of that. If their scheduling policy will differ depending on whether it is a one CPU or multiple CPUs. So irrespective of whether you are using thread or process, if there are multiple CPUs, all the CPUs or all the cores will get utilized while deciding which process or which thread is getting run. And only if you have only one CPU, then only interleaving will happen. And within a CPU, of course, interleaving is always a chance. So interleaving will happen within a CPU also. But if there are multiple CPUs, generally the OS will try to keep busy all the cores or all the CPUs. Okay. So just what are the advantage of thread then? I don't think we have a lot of time. So one, you can see it is doing resource sharing. So we are sharing memory, so it will not be expensive. It will be a lightweight. So that is why we call it as a lightweight. It is a lightweight copy of a process. So when you fork a new process, a completely new address space is created. But we'll see whenever create a new thread within a process, the address space remains same. So the new process creation is a lightweight thing. It does not require a lot of resources, and it will execute independently. We have seen because it has its own program counter, everything. So it will each thread will execute independently, and context switching will also be less expensive because as we have seen, we don't have to change the address space, and each TCP will be much less. The content involved in a thread control block will be much less than the content involved in the program control block, because as we said, many things are already shared amongst threads. So only things which are not shared, only the PC and stack pointer values, only those values needs to be saved and restored. All other things which are shared, they need not to be changed. So the context of the thread is also light, and so on. So we will continue from here in the next class, how we create threads. We will see the system calls for that, functions, the libraries which we use for thread creation, and discuss the issues that come using multiple threads. So I think we are already up with time. I'll just take the attendance.